Welcome back to Stories. I'm your host, Delia Quigley, and today I'm trying something a little different. This episode continues a conversation I began with another wise woman, Deborah Fernandez, in my previous episode, Life as a Creative Act. I felt there was more in the interview worth sharing, so this time, Deb and I turn inward. We explore the part of the artist that meets limitation, not as an obstacle, but really as a mirror. So in this extended conversation, I'm going to let it flow as we reflect on the inner life of the artist. So Delia, how about a little introduction to your friendship with Deborah Fernandez? All right, well, let's begin that it was the late 70s. I had heard about my brother's new girlfriend from a few sources. I remember thinking that she must be pretty outrageous to take on the eccentricity of my big brother, and I was right. We met at the gala party for the crew of the Knights of Santiago, the night her father was crowned as king. Deborah schmoozed the costume crowd with a charm bred from her Cuban roots. I immediately recognized a kindred spirit. The years that followed found us dancing the jota alongside Jose Molina, living together in a fourth-floor walk-up in New York City, watching each other grow into mature women intent on crafting a life out of what we loved. We have been friends for over 40 years, and there are only a handful of these special relationships you and anyone will experience in a lifetime. Deb was a full professor and the chair of dance at Skidmore College there in Saratoga Springs, and today she is retired, and she turned her creativity, her talent, and her artistic expression into creating really amazing, beautiful collage. She told me once that her teaching philosophy is along the lines of the quote by Shunryu Suzuki. He says, "Each of you is perfect the way you are, and you can use a little improvement."
In other words, I want to get us away from thinking it's just about the arts. Can I paint? Can I make music? That's up to you to work on those skills, but you can still be creative. And I think the main thing is that we've got to release ourselves. And this is what stops a lot of people. And I'll tell a story about my student. Is it good or bad? That's what gets us. Comparison. Is it good or bad? So it's not really about is it good or bad? It's is it authentic? That's the word that I've landed on. Is it true to me? And then you got to be ready to let go of people's judgments, because maybe you just want to draw squiggles. If that feels good and that feels authentic, and that gives you the feeling of something inside of you that wants to come forward, that wants to come out, then that's creativity. But you got to watch that little demon voice of, is it good or bad?
Okay, so when you were talking like that, Cy Twombly came to mind right away.
Yes.
Right. So scribbles, juvenile, childish, just all over the place, and yet highly revered as an artist, right?
But also highly criticized. If you ever look at comments on any, sort of social media platform, you'll see people saying anything from "what a genius, I love his work" to "that's dumb. A kid can do that."
So what was the genius part? The genius part was that he didn't give a shit what anybody thought, and he just did what he wanted to do.
And it was creative.
And it was creative.
Because there's what you feel in Twombly's work is this burst of life. It's a burst of authenticity. So don't let anybody tell you your authentic self is bad, which we love to do, to kids especially. And that's another thing when people say, oh, any kid could do that. I'm like, yeah, cool. Kids do cool stuff when they're free. Then they hit that age where the freedom gets a little bit shut down.
So how do you discern talent from that creativity in the child?
That's a perfect, it's not so much a child that I'll talk about, but that's a perfect segue into this story that right about when you and I were talking about creativity, I got this voice memo from my student, and she was thinking back to our composition class I taught her at Skidmore. And she was laughing about it, but she said that they showed their stuff. And then I said, and these were the days where you could be less filtered when you taught a class. I said, oh, so you're not really a dancer. And, that could really come across as a harsh comment, but she understood by the tone of my voice. She explained all this to me. She understood that it wasn't a put down. It was a kind of an inquisitive reaction she triggered in me because her work was different. And I couldn't figure it out yet because she was still kind of a young pup. But I saw something in her. She was funny. There was something about what she was doing that didn't fit into the normal dance composition. So for her, rather than an insult, was it sparked her. It actually gave her confidence. She said, oh, I'm not the thing that, I'm not the person that's going to go audition for a company and probably not get in, because she wasn't that kind of a dancer. But that teacher just saw something in me that made me realize I am going to go down this path of inquiry without possibly knowing where it's leading. That's another important thing. You have to be willing to follow where it leads. And not everybody can do that. But I thought that was so interesting that all these years later, that was a comment that actually gave her juice rather than shutting her down.
And where is she today?
She's in New Orleans. She's an incredible choreographer. She does very unusual projects. Just what I saw, but I didn't know where it would go.
And so she's creative and she has talent.
Yes.
What did you see? The talent or the creativity?
I think I saw the creativity because it was still in that realm of dance. She wasn't particularly a phenomenal dancer. Now she's actually a beautiful mover, but she hadn't found all that yet. So I think I saw it as her creativity, but more going back more to the word I mentioned earlier, authenticity. She was original. She was different. She wasn't copying anyone.
Couldn't we say then that she was true to herself?
Yes. I don't think she knew it at the time because it was just burgeoning. She didn't know what it was, but she knew it was something that was her. And so did I.
So like Rick Rubin talks about in his book on creativity, that if you're going to create something with an audience in mind, we know this, right? Then it's not authentic. Then it's commercial. You're doing it for someone else rather than allowing it to arise from you. Your own self-inquiry, your own authenticity is what you're saying.
Well, yes, but I've always had a little bit of a problem with that audience thing because I know what he means. I know that when you sit in a room, let's say, for instance, my own work now with collage, and it's just for me, there is a kind of a freedom in the way you pursue it because you're not thinking about presenting it to people. But I don't think doing something knowing you have an audience means it's not creative or it's not original or authentic.
If you're thinking, will they like this? Oh, if I do
that's
that.
Different.
Okay, so explain that.
Let's say you're doing a commercial type of a production that producers have invested in a lot of money. It doesn't mean the work's not going to be creative, but it means that you might not do something as brave as you would do if you weren't thinking, I better please this. We know a certain kind of audience comes to see this. I think it gives you some parameters maybe that aren't as free as when you're not thinking, will they like it?
So one of the examples we were talking about earlier was Francis Ford Coppola and his film Megalopolis. You can just say, we save up like to buy a new outfit or shoes or save up for a new car. And he saves $140 million. So we can make a film of what he said is beauty.
Yeah.
With no parameters.
Right.
And he didn't give a shit if it was successful or not.
Yeah.
And then some people would say, well, you needed parameters because it was out of control or common opinion. But to him, it was exactly what he wanted.
Well, it's what he wanted. He had the money to do it and he should do it. But, there's other artists. I mean, I think Charles Eames talked about this. I know Stravinsky talked about this. The line, limitations are freedom. So there's that part of creativity as well, that sometimes, you face a blank stage or a blank page, whether you're a professional or an amateur, and, what do I do? So by making limitations, you almost free the person up to give them pathways that they can follow. We might do that in a dance rehearsal. We call them prompts. You don't just say to someone, start moving, because they freeze up. You say, move with this in mind, make sure it goes from up to down, make a pattern of a circle or a spiral. Then they've got, oh, okay. And then suddenly they're very creative because they've got just a little bit of a map. So in that way, I think unlimited freedom is not always so good.
An artist that you feel has had unlimited freedom and needed, more limitation. Anybody come to mind?
That's a great question. Nobody's popping into my head, but I'm sure I've said that many times. Another great Stravinsky quote is, "The instrument that most composers should learn to play is the eraser."
That's a good one.
Yeah. So yeah, can people go blah, 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 blah,
Right.
And it's not great.
Because that's a good point. I've seen it before. It's almost like that can be ego or narcissism, that you want to hear me blah, 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 blah. Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
That can be on one hand. On the other hand, can be untalented people who are just blah, 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 blah to be heard.
Right. And there's that, there's that word again. So we're very aware of talent because we live in a world where we're constantly seeing what people do, whether it's their music or their theater. But when you get to that word creativity, that for me goes into a whole other way of just like I'm going to reiterate again. It's not maybe even associated with a product or a form that comes out. It can simply be the way you're living your life, the way you're thinking your thoughts, the way you're taking in the world around you. Are you flowing? What are some of the words that we do associate with creativity? I just said flow, and that is one of the ones I can feel the difference when my creativity tenses up a little bit. I'm not in the flow.
I think what we're trying to say here is, and I do it with the mindful mandala cards, and people say everybody's creative, and I know people who roll their eyes at that. But in reality, it's inherent in all of it. Creativity. I mean, we would never have survived as a species if we weren't creative about it.
Absolutely.
Making tools, finding food, growing food, procreating. So in that way, we're all creative. That's a part of being human. What's happened in our culture is we equate, as you said, creativity with art.
Yes.
That's a no-no.
It's a no-no.
I mean, it's great to be talented and creative and in the arts. We've seen
Yes.
that. But I also know very talented people who were also very creative and also in the arts that just ended up pretty much destroying themselves from not having limitation.
And also, there's something about creativity. We talked about kids before. Creativity can also possibly run out, not for real, but in your life. And so, I think it was Neil deGrasse Tyson that talked about the real problem with aging. And he said, people have families, they have responsibilities. They simply don't have the time to think or pursue knowledge anymore. And so that can shut down. And I think creativity can shut down if we don't keep it's almost like training,
Right.
You have to keep, or I will say vigilance. You've got to stay vigilant to, am I still discovering things? Am I still willing to inquire? Am I still willing to be a student? Am I still willing to reverse my position that I've held for so long that maybe helps keep me grounded? Or I think it was giving me something, but it's no longer serving me. If creativity doesn't stay in your life, you will wither.
So do you think that happens to people as they age?
Yes.
So that they retire, or they're no longer needed to be creative, and
connecting to things. And here's maybe where talent or art forms might come into it. If you're not lucky enough to have one of those talents or to have that be part of your life, maybe you don't have an avenue to keep that feeling of connectivity alive. And I'm just thinking this through for now, so it might be a little messy, but I think it is why you see so many retired people. They take up painting.
I know, I was just going to say.
And by the way, it feels good to them because they're using their hands. It might be painting. It might be they're molding clay. That is also a form of connectivity, right?
Yes. And also really good for the brain.
Very good for the brain. And it's connecting your body to something, whether it be that clay or your finger. I think finger painting is great. Remember how kids loved that?
Yeah.
It's great to paint with a brush, but that feeling of rubbing your hands and color comes out on a paper, that has to make people feel creative. Is it going to be a Cy Twombly?
Who cares?
Who cares? And so with that who cares question is a great question, Delia, and possibly the crux of all of this. Who cares? Why are you doing it? Are you doing it so people will say it's good? Or are you doing it because it brings you something? To me, that's really what it's going to boil down to. We're not going to get into AI, which you mentioned in one of our texts, but I will say I know friends who make music on those kinds of programs. I'm not against it. I think even when you use something that's AI or computers, you're still feeding it. But I will also say, I don't think the Beatles have anything to worry about. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
There's always going to be that genius that exists in someone, and they don't need AI, and they're not worried about somebody in their home making a song on a computer. I'm fine with it.
It's a new tool.
It's a new tool.
Right.
Right.
I think the interesting thing that's going to be if we're going to stop trusting creativity and talent because we don't know if it's real or not, if it's coming from inquiry and authenticity. We're constantly going, is this AI or did this person really create this?
Well,
so then we get creative people who have no talent. AI is going to be that talent.
Right. But they're still not going to have any talent because they are programming the AI. But you bring up a great point, and this goes to something we talked about earlier, that sort of judgment. I have a friend who makes music with his AI, and we have a mutual friend. She's a professor, and she's very rigid about this and she is insistent that that's not yours because you're using something other than you. And I said, no, it is his. He's using a tool, but he's asking the questions, he's feeding it. It is his. She refuses to see that. So she's stuck in a place of judgment that if you're not sitting at a piano with your actual fingers on the keys, it's not your music. I don't believe that. But it doesn't also mean that his song is good or that he's talented. It just means he's using a tool. We're going to go back to those same questions because talent is different.
Right. It's gonna be over and over and over again.
Over and over again. AI or anything else.
Right. Exactly. It's not going to be resolved because we're moving towards and away from something, right? And then there's going to be people like myself. I got into AI looking at Midjourney, and to me it was too easy as an artist. I was like, oh, hey, give me a picture of this and that, and then boom, and there it was, modified it, and I was like, oh, well, that wasn't any fun.
It kind of gypped you of those things we were talking about earlier, of like it gypped
the senses
of your research time.
Right. And my self-inquiry, and then my exploration. Yeah. And no, exactly. And on another hand, it was very limiting. There's this, that whole thing of limiting is the limitations that a mentor can put on us, or what we put on ourselves, or the limitation of the tool we use.
Well, speaking of the limitation of the tool we use, a lot of people used to say that about Bob Fosse, that he had certain physical limitations that didn't allow him to maybe be a Gene Kelly, but what he did was he invented his own style to match the limitations of his body, and it worked out pretty well for him.
Exactly. So that's
creativity.
Really there's creativity. That's creativity.
Using what he has, it doesn't fit into the standard of everybody else, and he makes it his own. That's back to the authenticity word. I think we're getting somewhere because we're separating the intention of the person. Why are you doing it? The questions you're asking yourself. Are you trying to get a job? Are you concerned about what people think? I mean, if you're trying to get a job, then you have to be concerned about what people think, because you're in competition with other people.
And the job has certain parameters that you have to meet and work within.
You have to be able to do it. If you're in the opera, you got to be able to hit the high C. So I think the main thing for anybody that's listening, or we're asking these questions of our own life right now, and you talk about this a lot, Delia, in other parts of your work, what's your intention? You got to know that before, and you got to free yourself. If your intention is simply to let what's inside of you come out, that's a kind of a connection, then that you have to just be true to that.
Speaking of true that, you're there, I'm looking over your shoulder at your refrigerator, what's on it, and there's John Lennon
Oh, yeah. Oh,
square
yeah.
and center.
My man.
I know.
The
And
truth
talk
teller.
about being true to yourself.
And a truth teller.
And a truth teller and an
Yeah.
icon.
Yeah.
And one who is, killed for that.
And a great talent,
And a great talent and a great creative talent. And one people look to and one AI strive for.
Yeah, right. And we have to revere those people. And I think, again, wrapping up some of the key things we've hit on, if people are wondering about creativity in their own life when they listen to this podcast, you can't compare. I like writing songs. I'm not ever going to compare myself to John Lennon. It's just something I like doing. And I know I don't have a lot of self-delusion. I know where I sort of rate in the people that I consider in my field, which is dance and music. And I don't have a problem with that. You're given a certain amount of talent. You do your best, just as you would if you have an amazing amount of talent. You do your best to fulfill that. It's still the same things. You work hard, you show up, you keep doing it, you keep asking your questions. I'm not ever going to be a George Balanchine. I don't try to be.
You don't have to be.
I'm trying to be me. Everybody else is taken as to be yourself. Everybody else is taken as the story goes.
Be yourself. Everyone else is taken. Oh, I love that.
That's a good one.
It is.
And the feeling of being creative, you can take those things that you work, like in yoga, when we say on the mat, you take it off the mat.
Yeah.
You take those lessons that you learn and you take them off the mat and you take them off the canvas or the musical score, and you try to apply them to your own life. And I think the people around you are going to get a lot more out of their relationships with you if you can be creative just in your everyday life.
Okay, so last question here.
Yep.
And I think I asked it for you in the interview I did with you a couple of years ago. What would you say to your younger self now, your young Deb coming up in the world, studying dance, say maybe in your late 20s, that Deb, right? Where you're just kind of on the cusp of making a major decision of what to do with your creativity.
I remember that you did ask me that. And maybe I said something in that interview about you have to be just dumb enough to keep believing that you're going to make it, that you've got it. I think there's some truth to that. I think of myself in those years almost like my little doggy Champ, with my nose to the ground, sniffing, trying to find where's my next move? Where's the next thing that I do? Some people are gifted and graced with a game plan, or they know from the time they're 5. I was not like that. So, I don't even know what I'd say to my young self because I probably wouldn't have known how to listen to it. But I will say that something in me had the confidence, whether it was warranted or not, I don't know, but I had the confidence to just keep going, to keep doing what was interesting to me. And it paid off. And I also want to say back to the young self, and to wrap this up, coming back to my student who talked about me recognizing the spark in her. If anybody out there is listening, one of the best things that you can do for young people is to see them. So she sparked my memory of my own teacher. And I was late when I started dancing. As you know, Delia, I was probably 20. And I walked into my first modern dance class and I felt at home. And it was Carol Turoff. She had danced with Eric Hawkins. We did a compositional study. She wanted us to do a color and I picked silver. And at the end, I went into this side split and I wiggled my fingers and toes at the same time. And she said, "Oh, wow, you're going to be a fantastic dancer." She saw something and it really wasn't dancer. I think she meant choreographer. It really wasn't anything except maybe that moment of authenticity. It surprised her. And those words, I felt seen. And that's what Alana told me. She said, I felt seen. Somebody finally sees me. That's what I'm trying to do with students if I still have them, no matter what age they are. And I'm going to be mentoring a 4th grader this year. And I just hope that I can provide him with that, just like I see you, I'm here for you, I recognize you. But a lot of people are so busy with their own stuff that they cannot see it in other people.
It's an awareness, being present in a moment
Yes.
Totally present to the person that you're, not thinking about what I have to do and where I have to go and what has to happen, but just really being present to this person you're speaking to, listening, hearing, and seeing them.
That's absolutely true, Delia. And also not being so, and here we go with that fixed position again, because Carol herself was very creative, not being so caught up in your own stuff that you can't see what's in front of you, which is why people's families often, these kinds of people with talent who they don't feel seen, their families don't really see who they are. They see them in the role that they play in their family.
Right.
So along comes a teacher and goes, oh, I see what you've got inside of you. It opens the floodgates for them. And it's a marvelous moment. And that's what Carol did for me. And it's what I did for Alana. So do it for someone.
Listening to my conversation with Deb, I'm reminded that every artist walks a fine line between what we want to create and what life allows us to create. Our ego imagines perfection, the flawless piece, the great accomplishment. But our soul, well, is after something deeper. It wants the truth. Limitation humbles us. It slows us down, strips away our false sense of control, and invites us to meet ourselves in the empty space. And it's there, in that stillness, that creativity reveals its true source, not as something we do, but as something that moves through us. When we stop fighting the limits, they often become the shape that holds our art, much like a vessel that contains the water. Without the form, the water would spill and be lost. So maybe the next time you meet a wall in your creative process or in your life, you can pause and ask yourself, what wants to emerge through this boundary? Because sometimes, well, our greatest art is born not from freedom, but from surrender. I want to thank my guest, Deborah Fernandez, for that wonderful interview and the fun it was that we had together. You've been listening to Stories. I'm your host, Delia Quigley. And you can read a lot more on deliaquigley.substack.com. I've got a lot going on these days, y'all. I've been trying to bring it all together. I've got an Etsy shop and my Mindful Mandala store on Etsy. Got calendars and prints. And I have... I'm a little out of control these days because I'm a purpose-driven woman, and there's so much I want to share with you with my writings, my Sunday guidance, and my 5-body wisdom. So if you haven't yet, sign up on my Substack, deliaquigley.substack.com, and I want to give a big shout out to those of you who subscribe on the paid format and financially support me in this work that I'm doing. Again, thanks so much for listening. This has been Stories. I'm your host, Delia Quigley. Until next time.